Welcome back to Friday Q&A. I hope you've all been excellent. If you have questions for next week's Q&A, please put them in the comments section below. If you want to support the channel, you can buy some of my music using the links in the video description, or you can sign up to my Patreon. All right, before we get into this week's questions, I'm playing my number one guitar, my PRS SC245. Stock pickups, stock everything except for the tuners, which are Godot SD90s. Nothing is taped on this guitar. I guess it's not truly authentic, but it'll do. Before I play some of this guitar and then answer some of the questions, we talked about the great Australian spread, Vegemite, last week. Well, I've got to talk about the great Australian Bicky, the Tim Tam. Look at that. Basically, if you want to understand something about Australia's contribution to world culture, you get a packet of Tim Tams. You get like a cup of English breakfast tea, and I probably can't tilt that too far forward. Put a little bit of sugar in it, a little bit of milk, so you got your cup of tea. And then you got your Tim Tam, or your Bicky as we like to call it. Not to be confused with an American biscuit. These things are, I mean, look at that. You wouldn't think that this is like a god tier thing, but what you do is you bite one end off. You bite a bit of the other end off. And here's the true hedonism, the true 21st century way of living. You drink your tea through the biscuit, and you play a whole bunch of guitar. Next week, I'll show you how to eat a meat pie and sauce. How does that sound? Until then, let's dive into the questions. And question number one, my favorite producers. I'm going to answer this in a very specific way. I want to talk about some of the producers whose stuff I've sought out to use as reference material for ragdoll albums, because one big part of making an album is you think about what you want it to sound like, and a good way to go about that is to find albums that you really like the sound of. And there's a few people over the years that I've kind of gravitated towards, and shout out to friend of the channel, Troy Nababan. He's basically turned me onto all of these producers or records, because he produces our stuff and it always sounds fantastic. And we kind of, you know, go through these little parallel phases where it's almost like we find one another listening to a lot of the same stuff. So I would say that just for kind of like straight up filthy rock stuff, I really, really like just about everything Nick Raskulenich has done. I think I pronounced that right. You know, the newer Alice in Chains stuff. He's done Mastodon. He's done Foo Fighters. He's done Rush. I think he did a Trivium album. Now, like, everything he does kind of turns to gold, in my opinion. I love the guitar sounds he pulls. I love his just overall production and the kind of, you know, vibe he brings to particular bands. He's very good at making bands sound like the best version of themselves. So, love Nick's stuff. Somebody else who I feel like when we did either the Ragdoll Here Today EP or the All I Want EP, Troy turned me on to Neil Avron's production, because he did one of the Anne Boleyn albums that I really like. So Neil Avron's great. Jack Joseph Pugh, or Poig, however you say it, JJP. He produced one of my favorite albums of all time, which is Tonic's Lemon Parade album. He seems like a pretty interesting guy as well. If you get a chance to watch any of his stuff and listen to him talk about production, pretty interesting stuff. I would say they're the kind of the three, I guess, more modern guys that stand out. Oh, and Brendan O'Brien, because Brendan O'Brien did Dogman, and he did he do Super Unknown as well? And he did Pearl Jam, and like those albums that to me are some of the best just rock albums, the best sounding rock albums, the best like performed rock albums. And now I have to try and remember how to play Dog. I froze, something like that. You know, apologies to King's X for butchering one of their songs. But yeah, Nick, Brendan O'Brien, JJP, and Neil Avron would probably be the four that jump to mind. I really like a synthwave band called The Midnight as well, and they produce a lot of their own stuff. Totally different stuff to the rock stuff I've been talking about, but I really like the way it all sounds. Will I ever shave again? Depends what part of my body you're talking about. I shaved my eyebrows about 10 years ago. That was a great life decision. In no rush to repeat that one. The last time I shaved my face, though, was my wife's birthday in 2016 because she had never seen me shaved, and I think I'm officially banned from ever being shaved again. I'm sure there's photos that exist of that, and I'm not really in a rush to share them, but you can probably find them on the internet, or you can just look at the old photos of me where I look like I'm 12 years old when I don't have a beard. So yeah, in no rush to do that, but you know, you never say never with these things. Have I ever had tendinitis? I've never had tendinitis, but when I was 16 or 17 years old, I did injure my hand, what I thought was a catastrophic injury, and it took about 2 weeks to fix. And what I had was not carpal tunnel syndrome, cubital tunnel syndrome. So whatever side of the arm carpal tunnel refers to, it was the other one. So that was really, really painful. It felt like every time I went to use my ring finger on my pinky and do a bend or something, that it was like getting, you know, stabbed right in the elbow and right all the way up through my arm. So that was pretty terrifying and pretty unpleasant. Other than that, there's been one other incident, and I kind of just chalk this up to stupidity and stubbornness, but in 2014, this would have been May, we did a 20-something date tour through the States in a little over 3 weeks. So it was like easily the most intense tour I've ever been involved in. It was a fun time. It was really, really hard work by the end of it, though. I think we did at one stage like 20 or 19 shows in 18 days or something like that. There was some ridiculous figure that we've never done since. But the day before we were going to do the first show, I was staying with my wife's family in Dallas, and we were going to fly out from there to LA to open for Skid Row. Dreams come true kind of thing. And I was putting my shoes on in the morning, and shoes sometimes have those straps. I bought new shoes, new sneakers, and I had my guitar playing finger stuck through the hook, and I kind of tried to push my foot like that to get the shoe on the foot, and my finger just went like and then it just got really, really swollen, and like half of it was black, and I taped it. And I did the gig the next day not using my pointer finger, so I played everything with 3 fingers, which was really, really interesting, playing, like drop C riffs and power chords like this. And I was telling myself, I should get this looked at. I should get this looked at. And I didn't. And by the end of the tour, it was playable. I could play on the finger. But I want to say maybe it's only been the last 12 months where it's actually kind of recovered, and it doesn't hurt at all to press on the finger. I can do these, Jeff Beck inspired 2-tone bends down on the G string. So yeah, I probably broke my finger or something like that, and I was too pig-headed to go and get it looked at by a doctor. Don't do that, basically. And if you do have any type of discomfort while you're playing, or you think you may have got an injury, don't do what I did. Go and see a doctor, or go and see a physical therapist and get that sorted out. Because being able to use your hands is pretty important when it comes to not just being a guitar player, but kind of all the things we do as human beings in the modern world. So yeah, there's my little story about injuries. Speaking of which, this is a hypothetical what if. What is my greatest fear as a musician? The fear of irrelevance, perhaps, but I feel like I've already got that one kind of nailed. People always talk about losing fingers or getting their hands chopped off or anything like that. I would not want that to happen to anybody, let alone myself, but I feel like music doesn't happen here. Music happens up here, and it happens in here. As corny as that sounds, that's where music happens. These are just the tools we use to make music. So I feel like if both my hands got chopped off overnight, I'm the sort of person who would find some kind of way to, I don't know, I would play the theremin, or I would, make beats or something like that with hooks for hands. I would do my best to get through it, mostly because, I look at the example of Jason Becker, who growing up was one of my favorite guitar players, and the fact that he is still making music when doctors gave him a couple of years to live, not only has he lived, he's still making music. And that to me is the most inspiring thing. So I figure as long as you still have ears on your head, and I mean, look at the example of someone like Beethoven who went deaf later in his life. He didn't even need his ears to make amazing music. So I guess if you're still there in some kind of, spirit or body or whatever is going on in this meat machine that we call ourselves, I just don't worry about that stuff. I only try to worry about the things that I do have control over. And I am fortunate enough to be in relatively good health, especially at the moment. So I literally have nothing to complain about. Losing my hearing, if I had to answer that question, would probably be the big one. But as long as I'm, kind of relatively healthy and relatively happy, then, thumbs up. All right, that got kind of metaphysical very quickly. Sounds like a good idea to play some filthy riffs. All right, let's get on to the fun stuff and talk about some music. Do I prefer Jerry Cantrell's earlier tones with the Bogners or the more modern tones with the Freemans? I would have to say probably my favorite sounding AIC record, and I know I'm going to get flamed for this, but it is The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here, which I'm guessing is his Freedman's. Sounds ridiculously gargantuan. I listened to that album so much, and that was definitely some of the stuff that's on Back to Zero was very inspired by that particular album. Guitar building. I think this comes from Brandon Proctor. Shout out to Brandon. I always love reading your comments. Getting into guitar building, you could start by, building a kit guitar. You could order some parts. You could, where, you maybe don't have to cut the nut and you don't have to drill everything out. You could just start with the basic assembly setup and electronics. That would be a really good way to get into building. Then maybe you could start with something like building a body and attaching an existing neck to it. And then once you're kind of into that, you could move on to, shaping a neck. I think the guitar neck is where all the hard stuff lives on a guitar. Fretting, radiusing, getting the neck profile right, making all the joinery work. So if you start with bodies, you could really get into the kind of custom mod stuff with that. I think that would be a lot of fun, and that would be my suggestion there. My acoustic guitar. Let me grab that. My acoustic guitar, it is made by Headway. This is their 40th anniversary. I always forget the model number. HC313, absolutely beautiful machine. I have Elixir 12 to 52 or 54 strings on here. This thing is just so lovely to play. It's loud, it's balanced, and it's very much, an acoustic guitar for an electric guitar player. The neck is slim, the action is just gorgeous on it. I actually toured the Headway factory. Headway falls under the brand of Divisor guitars. So if you look up on my channel, when I went to Japan 18 months ago, 2 years ago, I got to tour the factory and see where these are made, and it's a pretty amazing setup in there. And yeah, this is just a really fun guitar to play, and it's so loud. I don't know if it's going to translate to my vocal mic, but yeah, this stuff. So that's my acoustic guitar. I'm going to grab the electric back and play some more leads. Experiences with bad backline. I wouldn't say that I've necessarily had bad backline in the past, but I did have a few underwhelming experiences, which actually drove me to get my first Axe Effects and get into the wild and wonderful world of digital modeling. A few stand out to me. I remember doing a gig and just having the okayest sounding JCM 900. This thing, you couldn't really get more or less gain out of it. I don't know what was up with it, if it had an issue, but it just sounded fine. It wasn't great. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever played. But then I remember we're also playing a gig where it was a mine site gig, and the backline amp was like one of those little Fender Mustang combos, and the only way to kind of get it to work was to just take the direct out into the PA, and that just kind of made me think, well, this is kind of like a, budget solution, and it sounds, again, it kind of sounds about as good as that JCM 900 did. Maybe I should look into getting something where I could really dial it in and get the sounds that I want, and that led me eventually to get the Axe effects. There's a couple of other situations I can think of, like, hey bro, it's totally fine, you can use my amp, it'll be sweet. You get there and it's a Vox AC30 to play drop C hard rock through, and with like a tube screamer as your only boost pedal. So yeah, that's why I basically kind of moved over to using the Fractal stuff, because I can have my tone with me anywhere I go. It's so easy and convenient, and it sounds way better than any of those okay sounding solutions I ever had. So there's that. These two questions go great back to back. My diet and exercise regime is nothing really too special. Like, at home, my wife and I don't eat a whole bunch of kind of junk. We don't have fast food that much. Maybe once every couple of months. I cook at least twice every single day because I really, really like cooking. And, we just try to eat a lot of fresh stuff. We're really lucky in Australia because produce in Australia is amazing. Food culture in Australia is amazing. And there is a lot of awareness around, eating well and also exercise. I feel like Aussies are very kind of lifestyle conscious in that respect. I go to a friend's gym 2 or 3 times a week. I've got some stuff that I can do here and work out. I try to go for a walk every day. That's mostly for my mind because I spend nearly all day inside, recording and making videos, and just being able to go outside and, hear birds sing and breathe some fresh air and, just not be in here for a little bit, I find is good, not just for my health because I'm doing a bit of exercise, but for my mental health as well, because it just kind of helps me normalize and relax a little bit, which is super, super important. I would say equally as important as any of those other things. So to contrast that, let's talk about my favorite candies. In terms of Australian candies, hey, back to the start, the old Tim Tam always goes over pretty well. I have a super sweet tooth as well, so I need to moderate my exposure to these things. Australian candies, I would say the Tim Tams I really like. We have a whole bunch of what we call lollies, so you have kind of like, killer pythons, they're really good. Any of those kind of gummy candies I really like. And then in the States, that is just an absolute playground. Anytime we tour there, we all just kind of go a little bit mental. I love the intensely spicy snacks you can get there. Jalapeno anything is pretty good. I love the spicy Cheetos. What are those things that are just like death incarnate? I'll have to remember that for next time. But yeah, there's one particular like corn chip thing that just looks like it is covered in toxic nuclear sludge, and it's a beautiful thing. But I also really like Cliff Bars. That's one of my favorite things about the States. Cliff Bars are everywhere. Stuff with peanut butter is everywhere. I love that kind of stuff. It's no wonder why there's an obesity epidemic over there, because everything is so cheap and so full of stuff, yet so tasty. So yeah, there you go. There's some diet tips, and there's some non-diet tips to go with this video. Will I review the P-Rails? If you're interested in that, I can do a breakdown of it. I have P-Rails in one guitar with the triple shot system, which is kind of interesting. So I can put that on the list to do, as well as the TV Jones review, which I need to try and get to this week. And I feel like I'm near the end of this Q&A. I really enjoyed this Q&A. There were some very, very good questions here. Thank you guys for this. Don't forget, get your questions for next week in the comments. When do I think Ragdoll will tour the USA again? This is the last question. No idea. It's basically not feasible for me to leave the state of Western Australia at the moment. Western Australia has pretty much hard borders because of COVID-19, and the nice thing about that is we haven't had any community transmission of COVID-19 for like over 120 days now, which means that life is kind of a little bit more normal here than it is in other parts of Australia. I'm not doing this to rub it into anybody. Take, for example, in Melbourne, they have had to go back to a hard lockdown. So yeah, I have absolutely no idea when we're going to be able to tour the States again. I imagine that would be heavily contingent on some kind of vaccine being developed, which, depending who you talk to, is either right around the corner or it will never happen. I'm not making this video to speculate about any of that. I'm not too interested in making the comments a discussion about that. You can go and do that stuff in other places. But yeah, basically, people here are relatively healthy and happy, and we're so fortunate. And at the moment, I'm not thinking too far ahead. I absolutely would love to come back and tour the States with Ragdoll. A lot of our audience is over there. Some of our biggest fans are over there. It's just a wonderful place to play the sort of music that we play. And I look forward to being able to do it again at some point. But until then, I think it's just kind of focusing on, like I said, making sure the bottom line, like, there are more important things than my passion projects in life. People's health and people's safety are really, really important. So on that note, stay safe, be good to one another. If you have any questions you want me to answer for next week, you can get them in the comments, but please prioritize those two things in your life, and I will see you next time. Thanks so much for watching the video.